Good morning, students. This is Titus, and today's video lecture will be for 11th class English Hornbill, the chapter number 1 or the lesson number 1. This is for the CBSE board, and the title of the chapter is The Portrait of a Lady. This is the story of the author and his grandmother. Whenever I read this chapter, I also, remember to my grandmother, to whom I love very much. But now she is not in this world. But somehow I cannot, forget her, about her love and affection. So whenever I study it, when I was studying in BA, or in that class also there was English literature, and the same story was there. And when I read, I was remembering to my grandmother. I was crying also, like the same way today when I read this. So I remember to my grandmother also. So anyhow, this is not my story. This is a story of Singh, and this is an autobiographical writing. Okay. So when we look paragraph number 1 and paragraph number 2, we may see that the earlier stage of his grandmother and his grandfather. He described the earlier how her grandmother was and her grandfather also was. So actually now his grandmother become older, and she always wear white sari and ask the widow wear the cloth in India. Like the same way her appearance was also like same way. But when his grandmother says about her earlier time, how beautiful she was, and how charmful she was, how young she was. Once upon a time when she was young, she was so beautiful, etc. Okay, but it is very difficult to believe that, because when he born, means when Kushwant Singh born, and from that day or from his childhood, he is watching his grandmother like the same way. So that is why it is something very hard to believe him, but that was something true. So now the story is being started. So let's begin. So grandmother and Kushwant Singh both were very close. It was a time when Kushwant Singh's father and mother, they went to city, and for their settlement and for their job. So they left to Kushwant Singh with his grandmother, and they went to the city. So as Kushwant Singh was a very small boy, and he was living with his grandmother, and usually grandmother takes care of him, and she was bathing him, and she was dressing him, she was taking to school to him, all the things. As she was working her household work, at the same time she was caring to her grandson also. That was very interesting, and that was very responsible. So now author says here, the narrator says here, her grandmother was a very religious lady. She was always chanting mantras. She was always murmuring prayers. She was always saying prayers, because she was the religion of Sikh, and she was always interested to go to the Gurudwara and sit there. That was her everyday routine. So whenever she was bathing to her, whenever she was dressing up to him, and whenever she was making ready, she was packing his bag and packing his school bag, and so all the time she was always chanting mantras and praying, singing hymns, singing hymns also. That is for religious song. So such way she was always taking him to school. As she was taking him to school, so she was distributing breads, chapatis, because she always makes little bit high quantity of chapati that should be remained, and the remaining breads she always distributes to the stray dogs. At the same time, they reached the school. The school was very small, and that was very traditional school. There was not just like a building, or there was no such kind of blackboard, there was no such kind of whiteboard, there was no such kind of smart board. Nothing was there. So that was the school, just like under a tree. I remember when when I went to the school, so that school was also like this. We have studied in the side of a banyan tree. Our school was running under a banyan tree. Then after we made a small hut. Then after we hired a pakka house. Then after our school was a particular building. Like the same way, he was also studying in a small school, and her mother was expecting that he should learn religious things. Okay, so after finishing the school, his grandmother always take back to his home. So both have that is everyday routine. When he goes to school, her grandmother also coming with him, and both of them they go to school. Until unless his school hour not finished, her grandmother went to the Gurudwara, and he prays there and chant mantras there. Throughout the day she was spending there, and after getting over the school, both of them they have come to their home. That was the usual routine. So after some years, Kushwant Singh's parents they have been called to grandmother and Kushwant Singh, because now they have good settlement in city and they have their own house, and they wanted Kushwant Singh should be there to study in the school, in the English medium school. So both the grandmother and Kushwant Singh, both they went to the city and they have stayed there. Now there is something changing. Okay, there is something changing. So Kushwant Singh was going to village school earlier, but now he is going to an English medium school. Okay, so grandmother always going with him to the school, but now there is no need grandmother should go with him, because there is a facility of bus, and by the bus he is going to the English medium school, and he was studying there. So he was so happy for his studying. When he come back, and he used to say whatever he studied in the school, and the grandmother also little bit happy. And grandmother was always thinking, so is there any religious teaching or not? Is there any religious song or not? Is there any religious scripture teaching or not? All things he was always thinking there. She was always thinking there. So one day what happened there, when Kushwant Singh came and he said to her mother that he learned music, that was something amazing thing for her. So music is not for the student, music is for the religious person, music is for the religious teaching. That is how musics are being taught here. She was a little bit confusing about that. Like the same way, both were sleeping together, staying together when they are their village, but now when they have come there, there is something different situation, and now Kushwant Singh got a particular room, and both of them have little bit separation. That was also second phase of their story. When grandmother was in their village, so she used to feed dog, but now there is no dog. I used to feed a sparrow. So she little bread and some grains she always spread, and thousands of sparrows they would come to the courtyard and they eat. That was something. The same religious habit how that was in her village. The same thing she is practicing in the city also. Then Kushwant Singh graduated in an university. Then it is the time for going to abroad, means other country, for his higher study for 5 years. That was very difficult time for him to leave his grandmother, because he don't know when he will come back, his grandmother will alive or not. That was something doubtful thing, and due to that reason, his family also, they were also something, getting sad and disturbed. But somehow his grandmother was not disturbed. She was very happy and she was very strengthened. And it is a time for farewell. So grandmother embraced him and kissed him, and finally he went for his higher study to other country. Okay, 5 years he studied there, and after 5 years he came back. So when he reached to the railway station, he has seen his grandmother was there. His grandmother has came there to welcome him, and his grandmother also embraced him, and also the days have been passed. Her grandmother looks little bit, that old, and very happily they have come to the home. And in evening time, she didn't pray, done nothing, but she shouted, and she was beating drums. Okay, she called to some other women, and they made a sound of drums. That was the first experience of Kushwant Singh when his grandmother that particular day didn't pray. That was the first experience of him. So gradually her condition becoming little bit weak, and she knew that it is her last time. Then she called to all the family members and told that it is her last time. And somehow by chanting the mantras, she died. Okay, that was very sadful thing and a sorrowful thing for them to lose the greatest member of the family. But that was not only for them. The sparrow and some the birds, they also experienced that the grandmother has been died. So after death of grandmother, they have put some cloth, and the family members they were making arrangement for the funeral service. Such time when they come back to the evening, there was a mass gathering of birds. There was no chirping, there was no sound, nothing else. They experienced that they were also mourning. They were also mourning. They were also, making something sad. There were breads and there were, other grains which grandmother spread earlier before of her death. But they are not taking that. They are not taking that, and with very calm and quiet, they have sat around her grandmother. So finally, they have taken to the grandmother and made their funeral service. So the grains and breads were there, but the sparrows, they didn't take anything else. And without taking that, they flew away from the courtyard. And next day, the servant of the house, so he swept that and put that into the dustbin. That means the death of grandmother, that was not painful for the family members only, that was the painful for the birds also. When you love somebody, that may be animal, that may be human, okay, our love will influence them. If we do whatever, that is not that much influence, but our love always influenced to them. Like the same way, grandmother's love influenced them. Okay, so this is the story of Kushwant Singh. So I hope you have understood, And 11th class students, remember this is my first video, and I request you to subscribe my channel and share this video to your friends. Thank you. May God bless you.